My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my life, I believed that no matter how complicated a family became, a mother would eventually find a way to be fair. I was wrong. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, in a modest two-story house where my mother, Margaret, raised my older brother Daniel and me. From the outside, we looked like an ordinary American family. But inside our house, there was a truth I didn't understand until I became an adult. My mother had always loved Daniel differently, not necessarily more. At least, that was what I told myself. Daniel was 3 years older than me. He was charming, confident, and the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone notice him. I was different, quiet, responsible. I was the child who remembered mom's doctor's appointments. I was the one who helped pay household bills when money was tight. When Dad died, I was 19. Daniel was 22. Mom was devastated. I remember sitting beside her in the hospital hallway after Dad's funeral, holding her hand while she cried. Daniel wasn't there. He had gone back to work. I never blamed him for that, at least not then. Over the years, I became the daughter who was always available. When Mom needed groceries, I came. When the roof leaked, I called someone. When she needed a ride to the doctor, I drove 3 hours after work. Daniel usually called, I showed up. And whenever Mom thanked me, she would say the same thing. Emily, you're such a good daughter. I believed those words meant something. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. Mom called me one Sunday evening. Her voice sounded unusually serious. Emily, I need you to come home. Is everything okay? Yes, she paused. There's something I need to tell you. I drove to her house the next morning. When I walked inside, Daniel was already sitting in the living room. My mother looked nervous. Daniel looked strangely confident. Mom took a deep breath. I'm selling the house. I stared at her. The house? She nodded. Daniel is going to take care of everything. I looked at my brother. He smiled. Then Mom said the words that broke something inside me. I've decided to give Daniel the house. I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. What? The house will go to Daniel? But Mom, I couldn't finish. She looked away. Daniel leaned back in his chair. You'll understand eventually, Emily. I looked at him. Understand what? He shrugged. Mom has made her decision. My mother had spent years telling me how much she appreciated everything I had done. But now, when it mattered most, she was giving the biggest thing she owned to my brother. The house Dad had worked 30 years to pay for. The house where we grew up. The house where my childhood memories lived. Everything was going to Daniel. I asked Mom why. She simply said, he's my son too. Those words stayed with me because I suddenly realized something. She wasn't saying Daniel deserved it because of something he had done. She was saying he deserved it because he was Daniel. I left that afternoon without arguing. I cried in my car for nearly an hour. But I didn't know then that the house wasn't the only thing my mother had decided to give him. There was also a bank account, a retirement investment, a small piece of farmland Dad had inherited from his parents, and almost every valuable possession my parents had collected during their marriage. Daniel was getting everything. I was getting nothing, not even the old family photographs. I tried to accept it. I told myself that maybe money wasn't everything. Then, 6 months later, my mother died. And that's when the real battle began. At the funeral, Daniel stood beside the casket, greeting relatives, as though he had lost the most important person in the world. I stood in the back, alone. After the funeral, the family gathered at Mom's attorney's office. I expected to hear that Daniel was inheriting most of the estate. I didn't expect to hear that I was apparently receiving nothing at all. The attorney opened the file. Daniel smiled. Then the attorney said, there is one final document we need to discuss. Daniel's smile disappeared, and I had no idea that within the next few minutes, my entire understanding of my mother would change. Because somewhere inside that office was a letter my mother had hidden for years. And that letter was about to change everything. The attorney's name was Robert Miller. He had represented my parents for almost 20 years. He sat across from us with a thick folder in front of him. Daniel leaned forward. So, when can I take possession of the house? Robert didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. Emily, your mother specifically requested that you be present today. I frowned. Why? Robert opened the folder. Because there is a matter that concerns you. Daniel immediately interrupted. What matter? Robert looked at him. I'll explain. He pulled out a copy of Mom's will. The first few pages were exactly what I expected. The house was left to Daniel. The investment accounts were mostly assigned to him. The farmland was assigned to him. Even Mom's jewelry collection was listed under his name. I felt numb. Then Robert turned another page. And there is a separate instruction. Daniel leaned forward. What instruction? Robert looked directly at me. Your mother requested that Emily receive a sealed envelope. Daniel's face changed. An envelope? Robert nodded. Yes. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a white envelope. My name was written across the front. Emily Carter. My hands started shaking. I reached for it, but Daniel suddenly stood up. No, everyone looked at him. No, Daniel pointed at the envelope. That wasn't mentioned in the will. Robert calmly replied. It doesn't need to be. Daniel became angry. What is in there? I don't know. You expect me to believe you don't know? Robert nodded. Your mother gave it to me personally. She told me not to open it. I stared at the envelope. My mother had written my name on it. Why? What could possibly be inside? I opened it. There was a single handwritten letter. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. My eyes filled with tears before I even read the first sentence. Dear Emily, if you are reading this, I am no longer here to explain myself. I stopped. Daniel sat back down. I continued. I know you may believe I chose your brother because I loved him more. My heart pounded. Then I read the next line. That is not the truth. I looked up. Daniel was staring at me. Read it later, he said. I ignored him. The letter continued. Emily, I have spent years pretending that Daniel was responsible for something he was not. I froze. What did that mean, then? I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. And I allowed you to believe a lie because I thought I was protecting you. I couldn't breathe. Daniel stood up. Give me that letter. No, Emily, give it to me. No, Robert stood. Daniel, sit down. Daniel glared at him. My hands were trembling as I continued reading. Then I reached the sentence that changed everything. Your brother did not ask for the house. I stared at the page. That couldn't be true. Daniel had always acted like the house belonged to him. Then why? I kept reading. I forced the inheritance arrangement because I believed it was the only way to protect something your father left behind. I looked at Robert. Protect what? Robert said quietly. Keep reading. The next paragraph made my stomach drop. There is an account your father created before he died. An account I never told either of you about. Daniel suddenly became pale. I looked at him. He wasn't surprised. He looked terrified. I asked, Daniel, what do you know? He didn't answer. The attorney closed his eyes. Then he said, Emily, your mother's letter isn't the only document we have. He opened another folder. Inside was a bank statement. My name was on it. So was Daniel's. But the amount listed beside the account made me gasp. $486,000. Almost $500,000. And according to the document, my mother had been protecting that money for years. But why? And why had she made Daniel believe he was receiving everything? I turned the page. There was one final sentence written in Mom's handwriting. The truth will hurt, Emily, but it will also set you free. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed at a hotel near the courthouse because I couldn't bring myself to go back to Mom's house. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same sentence. The truth will hurt, Emily, but it will also set you free. The next morning, Robert called me. Emily, we need to talk. I met him at his office. Daniel was already there. He looked exhausted. For the first time in my life, my brother didn't look confident. He looked afraid. Robert placed several documents on the table. Your father created a trust shortly before his death. I stared at him. What kind of trust? A family protection trust. Why didn't I know? Because your mother asked me to keep it confidential. I looked at Daniel. He looked down. I asked, did you know? He shook his head. No, Robert continued. Your father suspected that someone was trying to take advantage of the family financially. I frowned. Who? Robert hesitated. Then he said, your father's business partner. My father had owned a small construction company. After his death, the company had been sold. I always thought everything was settled. Apparently, it wasn't. Robert explained that Dad had discovered financial irregularities shortly before he died. Money had been moved from the company. Contracts had been manipulated. Someone had attempted to hide nearly $500,000. Dad created a trust to protect the money until the truth could be established. But then he died unexpectedly. Mom became terrified. She believed whoever had taken the money might come after the family, so she kept everything secret, including from me, but there was something else. Robert handed me another document. This is the reason your mother transferred the house to Daniel. I looked at the paperwork. The house wasn't actually a gift. It was protection. The property had been placed in Daniel's name temporarily because someone had threatened legal action against the family. Mom wanted the house protected from creditors. Daniel stared at the document. So the house isn't really mine? Robert shook his head. Not exactly. Daniel looked at me. I swear, Emily, I didn't know. For the first time, I believed him. But then I asked the question that had been haunting me. If Mom loved us both, why did she make me believe she chose him? Robert opened the letter again. Because she believed you were in danger. My heart stopped. From who? Robert didn't answer. He pushed another photograph across the table. It showed my father standing beside a man I recognized. My uncle, my father's younger brother. I had not seen him in years. His name was Thomas. He had disappeared from our lives shortly after Dad died. Robert said, Thomas was involved in the financial scheme. I felt sick. You're saying my uncle stole from my father. We believe he did. Then Daniel spoke. Why would Mom hide this from us? Robert looked at him. Because Thomas threatened her? I couldn't speak. My mother had spent years carrying this secret. Alone. And while I thought she had chosen Daniel over me, she had actually been trying to protect both of us. But there was still one question. I stared at him. Why? To draw attention away from you? I suddenly understood. Mom had sacrificed my feelings to protect my life. She allowed me to believe she didn't love me. She allowed Daniel to believe he had inherited everything. And she carried the truth until her final days. But the story wasn't over. Because Robert told me something else. Emily, your mother didn't just leave instructions about the money. He opened the last page. She left instructions about what should happen if Thomas ever challenged the estate. I looked at him. What happens then? Robert answered. We go to court. And 2 weeks later we did. The courtroom was packed. Thomas had filed a claim against the estate. He argued that Dad's trust was invalid. He wanted the property, the money, and the remaining assets. Daniel and I sat on opposite sides of the table. For the first time in years, we were on the same side. We wanted the truth. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Thomas's attorney argued that my mother had been confused during the final months of her life. He claimed she had been manipulated. Then he looked directly at me. Emily Carter is attempting to take control of assets that were never intended for her. I almost laughed. I didn't want the money. I wanted the truth. Robert stood. Your Honor, we have evidence proving that Margaret Carter was fully aware of her decisions. The judge nodded. Proceed. Robert submitted medical records showing that Mom was mentally competent when she signed the documents. Then came the bank records. Then the trust documents. Then the original business records from my father's company. Thomas's attorney became increasingly nervous. But then Robert said, Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence. He held up the envelope. The deceased left a handwritten letter, specifically instructing that this document be read if the estate was challenged. The judge looked at me. Miss Carter, is this your mother's letter? I nodded. Yes. Did you read it? Yes. Does it contain information relevant to this case? Yes. The judge looked at Robert. Read it. Robert opened the letter. The courtroom became silent. He read the first part explaining the inheritance. Then he reached the section about Thomas, and the truth came out. My mother had documented everything. Dates, bank transfers, threatening phone calls, secret meetings, even the names of people who had witnessed Thomas attempting to pressure her. But then came the part that broke me. My mother's final words to me. Robert read, "Emily, I know you think I gave Daniel everything. I know you may hate me for it." I covered my mouth. But Daniel was never supposed to keep everything. The courtroom was silent. I needed the people watching our family to believe that he had control. Then, the truth is, I trusted you more than anyone. I began crying. My mother continued, "You were always the strong one, but I knew you would blame yourself if I told you everything." Robert paused, then read the final paragraph. "Please forgive me for making you feel unloved. I loved you so much that I was willing to let you hate me if it meant keeping you safe." I couldn't hold back my tears. Daniel was crying too. Even the judge seemed affected. Then Robert read the final sentence. "When the truth finally comes out, don't use it to destroy your family. Use it to rebuild what I failed to protect." The courtroom remained silent. The judge looked at Thomas. "Mr. Carter, do you wish to respond?" Thomas said nothing. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled in our favor. The trust was valid. The assets were protected. Thomas's claim was dismissed. But before leaving the courtroom, the judge said something I would never forget. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is not property. It is the truth. I walked outside. Daniel followed me. He stood beside me for several seconds. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "For what?" "For letting you believe I wanted everything." I shook my head. "I believed Mom didn't love me." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "She loved you more than you know." I looked at my mother's old house, and for the first time I understood. 3 months after the court case, Daniel and I sat together in the living room of our childhood home. Nothing had changed. The old fireplace was still there. Dad's photographs were still hanging on the wall. Mom's favorite chair was still beside the window, but everything felt different. Daniel handed me a folder. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a legal document. He had transferred part of the house into my name. I looked at him. "You don't have to do this." "I know." "Then why?" He smiled sadly. "Because Mom wanted us to share it." I looked around. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was our childhood. The place where Dad taught Daniel to ride a bike. The kitchen where Mom taught me how to make pancakes. The hallway where Daniel and I used to argue. The room where Mom sat after Dad died. It held everything. We decided not to sell it. Instead, we created something in Mom's memory. A small community fund for single parents who needed help with housing and legal expenses. Mom had spent her final years worrying about protecting her family. We wanted her legacy to protect other families too. Daniel changed as well. He became less interested in money. He started spending more time with his children. He called me every Sunday. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we said nothing. But there was no longer a wall between us. One afternoon, I found Mom's old recipe book in a kitchen drawer. Inside the cover was another note. I recognized her handwriting immediately. It said, "Family isn't the people who receive the most. Family is the people who stay when everything else is gone." I sat on the kitchen floor and cried, because suddenly I understood the whole story. My mother hadn't given my brother everything. She had given him a role. She had given me a burden. And she had trusted that someday, when the truth was safe, I would understand why. But there was one final surprise. Robert called me 6 months later. "Emily, there's something else." I laughed. "Please don't tell me Mom left another secret." He laughed. "She did." My heart stopped. "What now?" "She left a final gift." He mailed me a small box. Inside was a key, and a photograph of my parents standing in front of a small cabin in Michigan. I had never seen it before. There was another letter. This one was shorter. "Emily and Daniel, this place was your father's dream. I couldn't give it to you while I was alive because I needed to keep it protected. The cabin belonged to both of us. Mom had saved it for years. She wanted us to discover it together. Daniel and I drove there the following summer. When we opened the door, we found an old wooden table. On it were two envelopes. One had my name, the other had Daniel's. Mine said, "For the daughter who thought she wasn't loved enough." I opened it. Inside was one final sentence. "You were never second, Emily. You were simply the one I trusted to understand the truth." I cried. Daniel hugged me. And for the first time since childhood, we cried together, not because we had lost our mother, but because we finally understood her. It's been 2 years since my mother's death. I still miss her. Sometimes I still catch myself reaching for my phone because I want to call her. Then I remember. She's gone, but the anger is gone too. For years, I thought my mother's greatest mistake was choosing my brother. Now I realize that wasn't what happened. She chose both of us. She just couldn't tell us why. Daniel and I still own the family house together. We kept Mom's garden exactly the way she left it. Every spring, we plant flowers beside the front porch. And every Thanksgiving, our entire family gathers there. Children run through the same hallway where Daniel and I once fought. My nieces sleep in the bedrooms where we grew up. And Mom's chair still sits beside the window. Sometimes I sit there. I close my eyes, and I imagine her saying, "You understand now?" I do, I finally do. The money was never the real inheritance. The house wasn't the real inheritance. The farmland wasn't the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the truth. And the second inheritance was forgiveness. I forgave my mother. I forgave Daniel. And eventually I forgave myself for believing I wasn't loved. Because sometimes people make terrible decisions while trying to protect the people they love. Sometimes love doesn't look like fairness. Sometimes it looks like sacrifice. And sometimes the person you think betrayed you is actually the person who is protecting you all along. My mother left me one final lesson. Never judge someone's love by what they give you. Judge it by what they were willing to sacrifice for you. I wish she had told me the truth sooner. I wish I hadn't spent so many years believing my brother was more important. But if I had known everything from the beginning, maybe the story would have ended differently. Maybe Daniel and I wouldn't have grown apart. Maybe Mom wouldn't have carried so much fear alone. Maybe we could have protected each other. But life doesn't give us the chance to rewrite the beginning. It only gives us the chance to change the ending. And that's what Daniel and I did. We changed the ending. My mother thought she was leaving behind an inheritance. Instead, she left behind a family that finally learned how to love each other without keeping score. And if you're listening to my story right now, I want you to remember something. Don't assume you know what is happening inside another person's heart. Don't let money destroy relationships that can never be replaced. And if someone you love is still alive, tell them you love them. Don't wait for a hidden letter. Don't wait for a courtroom. Don't wait until the last goodbye. Because sometimes the most important words are the ones we never get a second chance to say. My name is Emily Carter. And this was the story of how I thought my mother gave my brother everything until a judge read her hidden letter. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves emotional family stories. And remember, sometimes the truth doesn't destroy a family. Sometimes the truth is what finally brings it back together.